Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Poetry Goes Viral on Carolina Poets. My name is Kimberly Sims, and I'm the founder of Carolina Poets, along with Andrew K. Clark. We're so excited to be with you tonight for our December show. We are normally twice a month on the second and fourth Thursday of the month. However, we've had some holidays in here, so we missed our second Thursday in November due to Thanksgiving. And then we did a NaNoWriMo show at the beginning of November. This is our December show. We'll miss our second December show because it will be Christmas time. And then we'll see everyone back in January when we get back to being on the second and fourth Thursdays. I'm just going to chat for a few minutes before I introduce our poets tonight, just to give everyone a chance to get on the feed. We are multicasting this evening, and so what that means is that we are broadcasting on the Facebook page, Carolina Poets, or you may be watching on the Facebook page, Wits and Poetry, or you may be watching on our YouTube channel at Carolina Poets. Wherever you are, we're so glad to have you. You could be anywhere in the world tonight, and you've chosen to spend your evening listening to poetry, so we totally appreciate that. If you've never been on our YouTube channel before, Carolina Poets, definitely check that out. We have an archive of all of our past Poetry Goes Viral shows there, which is actually quite a lot of shows because we started this in March of 2020. I think it's close to 40 full 1-hour shows that we now have on the YouTube channel. And then we also have about another 100 short videos of spoken word poets, some of which are from our archive and some of which have been recorded since 2020. So if you're a poetry fan, definitely click over to Carolina Poets on the YouTube and hit the subscribe button and all that good stuff. We do have a great show for you all tonight. We have got 3 poets who have recently had new books come out. We have got Tom Johnson, Paul Jones, and Pat Riviere-Seel, and I'm going to be introducing all of those to you in just a few moments. And then just to let you know, definitely follow us on Facebook. We also have an Instagram page called @Carolina_Poets. So you can hear about all of our upcoming shows through our social media. I do want to give a shout out to the South Carolina Arts Commission and to the nonprofit Wits and Poetry, which provides funding for the show and helps us do things like pay for our broadcasting software and all that good stuff. But anyways, I don't want to chat forever. It looks like we've got a few folks who have joined us, and I know we always have folks kind of popping in and out throughout the night. One of the great things is if you do get called away during the middle of the broadcast, you can always come back to the Facebook page or the YouTube and catch the show later on. But without any further ado, I do want to go ahead and introduce our first reader because we're always short on time with all this wonderful poetry. Our first reader tonight is Tom Johnson. Tom Johnson is librarian emeritus from the University of South Carolina, the South Carolinian Library in Columbia, and has been writing, publishing, and editing poetry and other literary genres for many years. Among his published works are the Lillian Smith award-winning book, A True Likeness, the poetry anthology, You Year, Cameraman's Journey from 2002, and the Costume New and Selected Poems from 2010. He also has a brand new book out that he's going to be talking about a little bit tonight as well. And then his other book is Worlds Unmasked, A Journey Through the Plague Years, a collection of fine art photographs and poetry created by Johnson and his daughter, Miranda. Oh, and this is the one that's just come out, is The World Unmasked. So that is his new book. He's going to be sharing some poems from that tonight, as well as some of his other poetry. He is a life member of the Board of Governors of the South Carolina Academy of Authors, and he currently resides in Asheville, North Carolina. So please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Tom Johnson.
Thank you so much, Kimberly.
You are so welcome. You are so welcome. Well, we're so happy to have you here. I'm going to pop backstage so we don't use up too much of your time, but I cannot wait to hear your poems.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this. It's a great honor, and I appreciate it. As Kimberly said, I've been writing and publishing poetry for a long time. I would say that my poetry is probably on the more conventional side, but the listeners tonight and the viewers tonight will have the pleasure of getting some nice cutting edge poetry from the other poets. But mine is fairly conventional. I like writing short poems. So I'm going to start tonight my reading with several very short poems from my book called The Costume, which was published in 2010 by the 96 Press in South Carolina. The first poem I'm going to read is one that I wrote many years ago in a poetry class that was taught by James Dickey. And it was a verse composition class. And this was a poem that came out of an assignment that he gave us to do. We all had to write an epitaph. And you all know what an epitaph is. It's something that's supposed to go on that grave marker when you're gone. So we all wrote epitaphs. And we all had to share our reading of the epitaphs in class. And when I was done reading mine during the critique, several other students said that they thought it was hopelessly trivial and sentimental. And so I took that in and probably would have cast this little work aside, except that James Dickey liked it. And so I wasn't going to argue with James Dickey. And so really my work as a poet really began because he encouraged me. And he liked this little poem. It is also a rhyming poem. And I know there's some in our audience who think that poetry is not poetry unless it's rhymed. And so I thought maybe we ought to begin with a rhymed poem tonight. So this is a rhymed poem, very brief, written as a classroom assignment for James Dickey, and is called Epitaph for the Third Wife. Here lies the last wife of the three, that just her later life was spent with me makes my heart burst. She should have been the only, or of all, the first. That's Epitaph for the Third Wife. Hopelessly sentimental, but liked by James Dickey. And he chose it for his anthology of poems by his students called From the Green Horseshoe. This is one of mine that he chose for that book. I like writing all kinds of styles and genres within the poetry family. And another kind of poetry that I like to do is found poetry. And I think everybody may have an idea of what that is, and maybe some of you have written it. It's where you take a received text that you like or it appeals to you in some way, and you take from that text words, images, and then you rearrange them according to your own poetic impulse. And I have enjoyed writing found poetry, and my next poem is a very short poem, a piece of found poetry that comes out of a newspaper item that I saw in the Buford Gazette from January 24th, 1904. I prefer writing found poetry from text that is out of copyright. I don't want to get in trouble by taking somebody's work that's under copyright and fooling with it. So the found poetry that I've written has been written from material that is no longer under copyright. Two terms in this poem I need to tell you, mention briefly. The poem car box, it simply is boxcar. It's a railroad car. But at that time, they were using the term car box. And then there's the term Southern's Yards. And that Southern was the name of the railway company. It was the Southern Railway. So this poem is called Punishment. from the Buford Gazette, January 24th, 1904. William Harris, a little colored boy, stole a small sack of flour from a car box in the Southern's yards. The boy's father begged for his son on account of his youth and agreed to flog him in the presence of the officers. Now, I think sometimes a poem has more power as a page poem because the shape of the poem may make a difference. And the shape of this poem was simply a vertical line of words that would suggest a hanging or a lynching. Punishment, a found poem from the Buford Gazette, 1904. I also like writing narrative poetry, not long narrative poems, but fairly short ones. And so the third poem I'm going to read from this book, The Costume, is a narrative. It's a story about a young man on a trip, and a young single man. And as some of you will remember from your youthful days, if you're traveling alone, you're looking for people to hook up with. You're looking for other travelers to make friends with and maybe enjoy the trip with. Well, this poem is called The Woman on the Finland Express. Take a summer season 30 years ago, a young man on his continental prowl, a traveler callow in his knowing and unknowing, spying on the fast train to Helsinki. In the seat across the aisle, a stylish older woman in a smart brown coat, her auburn hair pulled back and flowing loose from graying roots. Her chin rests on a manicured right hand. She stares beyond the window at the northern landscape hurtling by. She cries without a sound or move, paying no attention to the rivulets the tears make in her makeup, nor to him. She never looks his way. They never speak. Train speed is all they share, and being hurled toward separate worlds and ends. The trips are over now. What's learned has long been learned or long forgotten. What is left seems little in the knowing, all except the question as to tears, which still insist upon an answer. Those, for instance, on an unfamiliar face in foreign parts, were they for the lack of love and thus the weary, endless search? Or from the sudden recognition in the midst of having it completely that it's gone too soon? Like beauty through a moving glass, or warmth that begs another moment from a dying summer. The next three poems that I'm going to read are also, one of them is a narrative poem, but these are tribute poems. I like to pay attention to other poets. I don't think you can, for me, I can't write poetry without reading poetry. I love poetry, so I have to read it. And and I really don't think anybody can write it unless they read it. And so I like to write tribute poems. And these next three poems are tribute poems. I suppose you could call them name-dropping poems. They're telling you the poets that I like to read. And these happen to be three men. I have a wonderful women poets that I love too. But for tonight's reading, I happened to choose these three, partly because two of these poems were just written, and I thought it would be fun to share with you some new work. So this first tribute poem is also a narrative poem. The narrative involves a man who sees his family, his wife and children, all leave for a day trip to Charleston, and he's left alone. And the tribute, the poet whom I'm paying tribute to is a Greek poet named Constantine Kavafi, who wrote very powerful stuff in the 20th century. And so this is a combination of a family poem and a tribute to Kavafi. Here it is. It's called Lunching with Kavafi. The girls have all gone south to Charleston for the day. Beneath their ears, a dab of scent like honeysuckle from the fence. Around their necks, they wear those metal tags with who they are, address, and blood type, all spelled out in case of accident, in case the final question for their freedom is, who must be notified? Leaving it for Rainbow Row, the Dock Street play, a walk along the Battery, then shrimp and grits, who would they ever think, why would they ever think of home and getting back or not? They know, and I, exactly in whose time and place they live, which city, state, and country, mirth, forgetfulness, rebirth. Alone at lunch, I find Kavafi's poem In Harbor and meet Emmis, that young would-be perfume seller lost forever on a voyage in his pan-Hellenic world, always living in the hearts of parents left behind who never knew he died. To be remembered also in the souls of those whose children somehow managed to return alive from their own long day's journey south. Lunching with Kavafi. Sometime find him and read him. I also like a poet named Rilke, a Czechoslovakian-born poem named Rilke, Rainer Maria Rilke. And I don't always get Rilke. I'm not always sure I know what he's talking about, but I love reading him. He's wonderful to read. He's mysterious and he's thought-provoking and he's very, very profound, I think, anyway. So here's a little poem called Approaching Rilke, written just last week or a couple of weeks ago. Rilke, I'm not sure I know exactly where you're going, but still hope to keep approaching where you are. When the sky's all blue, it's ravishing, as if no other blue were blue. After April rains, the grass is green like no other green, and smells as if no other grass were fragrant. All things, here or there, on earth, in heaven, elsewhere, hold possibility of wonder. Go to earth and sky. They'll give you all the story you need. And finally, I'm going to break the pattern here just briefly because I want to read you the poem which triggered my poem. And the poet is a Brazilian poet named Carlos Drummond de Andrade. And this is a poem of his that I discovered just recently. And he uses the rather unoriginal convention of repetition. Repetition is a favorite convention of poets, including of me. I like to use repetition. And so this is really a poem focused on repetition, but I like it. So here it is. This is on De Andrade's poem. Now, and then I'll read you mine. It's called In the Middle of the Road. In the middle of the road, there was a stone. There was a stone in the middle of the road. There was a stone in the middle of the road. There was a stone. I will never forget the occasion. Never as long as my tired eyes stay open. I will never forget that in the middle of the road, there was a stone. There was a stone in the middle of the road. In the middle of the road, there was a stone. And this is what I came up with as a response to that poem, copying it in some ways, but paying, this is an homage poem to Andrade. I like the seasons of the year, so I sometimes will write poetry that has to do with the different seasons. And when December rolls around, I guess I kind of like to do something with December. So I have called my poem December, after Carlos Drummond de Andrade. In the deepest black of night, there was a star. There was a star in the deepest black of night. There was a star. In the deepest black of night, there was a star. I shall always remember the night, as long as my tired brain can feel, or my weary eyes can think. I shall always remember, in the deepest black of night, there was a star. There was a star in the deepest black of night. In the deepest black of night, there was a star. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you, Tom. That was so great. Appreciate it. How can we get your new book? Is it out yet?
It's out, and it's only available in the Lowcountry right now through the Litchfield Books in Pawleys Island.
Great. I'm sure they have a website, so I'll put a link up to that then. Awesome. Well, thank you again. We so enjoyed it. This has been phenomenal. And
thank you.
I always enjoy also hearing about all the other poets that you're reading. So very inspirational.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Appreciate it being here.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, great. So definitely we'll put a link up. I know Litchfield Books has an online presence, so I'm sure we can order Tom's book virtually through the Litchfield Books bookstore down in the Lowcountry of South Carolina. This is really just such an exciting night of poetry. We've got 3 just phenomenal poets. Tom is always such a treat to listen to. I've got the honor to hear him read in person many times. And so that is always a treat. But next up, we have Paul Jones, which is going to be another phenomenal reader. Paul also has a new book of poetry out, so we'll give you some information about that here in a minute. But Paul Jones has published poetry in many journals, including Poetry, the River Heron Review, Red Fez, Broadkill Review, as well as in cookbooks, in travel anthologies, in collections about passion, love, and in the Best American Erotic Poems, 1800 to present, from Scribner. Recently, he was nominated for 2 Pushcart Prizes and 2 Best of the Web Awards. His chapbook is What the Welsh and Chinese Have in Common. A manuscript of his poems crashed on the moon's surface in 2019. His book, Something Wonderful, will be available in November of 2021, which is right now, from RedHawk Publications and your favorite bookstore. Jones is Vice President of the Board of Trustees of the North Carolina Writers Network and a member of the Carrboro Poets Council. So please give a warm virtual welcome to Paul Jones.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And thank you so much for putting us on. And Tom, I also read poetry because I like poetry.
Yes. Awesome. Awesome. I think you have to, I mean, I have to read poetry for about 10, 15 minutes before I can do my own writing. So I think that is so true. But I'm going to pop backstage because I don't want to use up your time, but I'm so excited to hear your work.
Thank you. I thought I'd show the book cover first so you can know what you're getting into. And there's the back. It's a very nice photograph there, found by Chase Dimmock of the online journal called As It Ought to Be. I'm going to read poems, and I have to say in conversation with Tom that I love Kavafi. I've been waiting for the barbarians a long time, and I'm afraid they might come. And Rilke, also particularly The Archaic Bust of Apollo, which is a wonderful poem I recommend. I'm going to read some poems, and you might notice that I'm at base a formalist, and we're going to move through some that do that, but it'll be ways that I hope will please you. The first poem is called Clear Channel. My grandmother staked her lot with her signs. Cleopatra Fortune, reader, and canary breeder. She tugged me to her side and showed me her white bird. Through her few teeth, she hissed her words. The mildewed air washed her swollen ankles. She shuffled as if manacles kept her there. She dissolved into a chair. Give me your hand, and you'll dream your true name, she said. But I made a fist and ran upstairs. I dove under covers with a radio's blast pushed to my ear. A signal came across the clear channel that carried an earnest Cuban voice that warned of reds. Between ballads, someone said, sold olive oil, religion, and dark cigars. A crackle came, then a samba. Soon that stopped, and static grew like the language of the spirits I knew grandmother knew. Half naked, I half heard a hovering overhead and nearly said, black wings, black day. The next thing was that song, beckoning. I tossed my little radio off the bed, let canary songs fly into my head. The power went out. What I knew of darkness grew as thick as doubt. Against the blackness, I held out my hand until a step on the stairs creaked, grandmother. From the cool air, I took the name she said, and the music of late night bloomed glad. The next poem is a triolet called The Saint of Trees. What is the proper sacrifice to please our Lord, the Saint of Trees? I asked the ferns for their advice. What is the proper sacrifice? Lie here and dream of paradise. Sink into the soil like leaves. That is the proper sacrifice to please our Lord, the Saint of Trees. The next poem is, since we've talked about forms, it's a hinged double sonnet, but don't let that bother you. It's a poem that I hope that you'll enjoy, about bread. Pick up a round of bread and tear it. All the mountains you see are snowy, and the valleys too. The glow of it, as if winter had been waiting there in its regularity, its need to own the earth, to remake landscapes, a world where nothing that is cut bleeds. The edges of this world rise like snakes. Look closely, see their fangs and scales. They're dragons at world's edge, always awake. Some have grown brown wings and sweeping tails. Bread's ragged edges are periphery. The crust holds in bread's true mysteries, the charmed life of yeast and all that entails. Yeast, many charms? What does that entail? Their gasp give bread its rising mystery. Gases grown in gluten's periphery. Neither plant nor animal, no heads nor tails. Water, grain, and a little warmth await these beasts without skin, feathers, or scales. In their house of dough, they writhe like snakes. They die when bread is baked, but never bleed. As their bodies build their unique landscapes, mountains and caves, you hope for as you need, wishing winter into the dough. There, inside the browning crust, yeast grows and fits. Yeast, in half an hour, make their snowy scenes. Thank the yeast, then raise the bread and tear it. As poets, we're intrigued to do things probably we shouldn't do. One of those things, especially in our isolation, is to write bird poems. I too have committed bird poems, but this poem is called Against Bird Poems. The way poets go on about them, you'd think birds were their inner lives. Instead, they're yogurt for breakfast. No fruit, no nuts, no sugar, sour taste. However healthy they are dull. They're one more trip to the ATM to obsessively check your balance. You get a couple of torn, decrepit Jackson faces for your empty wallet. You slouch away, unsatisfied. You might as well stick your hand in a drawer of unsorted knives at night as write a poem about a contentious wren, or one more clownish titmouse, or that one indefatigable cardinal fighting his own image in the window. Last August, I saw a black snake curled around an emptied nest in the quince bush. 3 firm lumps sagged in his body-long belly. Flaccid and docile as I unwrapped him from the thorny branches, he never knew where he was being taken or why. For the next poem, I want to take you back in time to 1954. This is a time in which 2 seemingly large events happened. One that was quite large, Brown versus Board of Education, the beginning of the dismantling of the systematic segregation of our lives from our neighbors. And the second is that the farm once owned by Billy Graham's father became the Park Road Shopping Center, the first strip mall shopping center of size in the South, in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dividing waters. Signs divided the waters when all the creeks were rerouted around the evangelist father's fields, and crops withered as the shopping center sprouted, and red hills of clay mounted in red dust in oily mist. Even their hair was crimson. Men at break, the setting sun, their hard work clinging to them, made them all seem one red race. But soon they were replaced, as if by some magic whim, by clean, careful, concrete men. What was to come next was grand. A new J.C. store with tiles that set apartments apart like pools of rain that captured only one tint. The boys' section was lime green, the toys brown, sports blue, and more. My grandmother took me in. I think I was about 4, and the grand old man himself held the door as in we poured to gawk at the full shelves, wonderfully uniformed bins, and the tall, tight-lipped women. Thirsty from all this outpour, I looked for water fountains and found two flanking a door. One shiny metal marked white, and a white one called colored, new, but with a dripping drain. Still, the colored one seemed right. I stepped up for a cool sip, one hand bravely on the knob, thinking I'd made the slip. With a rough yank, I was robbed of my try for those colors and shoved over to the other by my silent grandmother. But there the water ran red. My lips looked like they had bled, a blood common to all kids. The drips draining on the tiles ran into young new styles section like biblical curses. I drank deep and almost burst. For the next poem is a dialogue poem. You'll be able to tell the differences, and it's the title poem of the collection. Something wonderful. Let me mention something wonderful, she said. Bats eat darkness. I see them shadowing the streetlight, I said, diving to feed. Like hungry fish in a small light pool, they leap out of darkness as if breaking the water's surface, as if for a moment that alien world, that other, was their home. Bats feed as darkness breaks. No, bats break into darkness to feed. Light warns them, stay away. Think fireflies at the end of day. Their lights shine bats away. But aren't those lights a begging to breed, not just a sign of bitter taste? As with passion, they say, come here, and keep apart for now. Right now, bats break the darkness to feed. Fireflies flash to breed. Each rules his own kingdom. Darkness makes a boundary to break. Some dive, some flash to mark the edge. To transgress is to bless the penumbra, the lie of difference. Don't we rise from earth? Isn't our time soaring in this life a flash, a hope for love? We see the lures, but we know we must be fed by darkness and are born to taste the bitter light, the sweet, then bitter light. The next poem is a persona prose poem in the form of a Facebook status. It's called Betty's Facebook status. Here's what Betty has to say. I've got a boombox I bought in 1985. I only play 2 tapes, Beastie Boys and 9 to 5. I found it in the attic after I finally got divorced. It's the reason I'm alive. That and a cat named Beetlejuice and a son in California who FaceTimes with me twice a week. And a check from the bastard with whom I never speak. Not a check really, but an e-transfer from his lawyer into my account from that no account. I quit buying razors. I quit buying Nair. Grow where the hell you like, I say to my body hair. Not that I don't care, but instead I found some value there, some beauty really. My reflection isn't their perfection anymore. I'm the one who can, after some adult pottery classes, turn mud into a plate, into a vase, into a magic mask. The mask is one way to see and be seen more clearly. The mask has one eye a bit cockeyed, a nose a little off center, and one nostril flared. Not like the photo I made for Match. That one is posed, lit up, touched up, softened up, made up, and smoothed out. That one got 200 messages in 36 hours. What took you so long, guys? One message I might have answered began, I too have seen tragedy. At our age, who hasn't? I almost read it. I felt a kinship there, but a distant one, like a shadow image of a family photograph of a forgotten third cousin. I held a mask between me and the screen. He knows how to play the records, honey, but you know the grooves too well. You know those moves, said the mask. The mask ain't illin'. The mask knows the truth. Some places it's all taken and no given. Pass me the scalpel and I'll make the incision. I make my own decisions. I cut out the part of my brain that goes on suicide missions. I mean, Beetlejuice has his favorite box, and I've got mine. I turn all the mirrors in the house around so they won't shine. And for my last poem, I too dislike them. Aspiring poets are jerks who confuse quirks with sound work. Nietzsche was pissed with poets. They muddy their shallow streams to make their song seem deep. But what of the strange ballet of words, rhymes that interplay of loves found and gone astray? They cause commotions, Plato said. Those poets have to go. Their images are too obtuse. Don't poets' images excite, like small boats on the sea at night, flickering patterns of light? In the end, nothing happens, as Auden's cold pen told us. We survive, but we won't transcend. They were right, the old masters. Poets are useless bastards. Thank you.
That was fabulous. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Paul. What fun. And I love the cover of your book. It's really great.
Thank you.
And I've put a link to RedHawk Publications into the chat so that if people want to get your book, they can go there. Can they also get it from your website, smalljones.com?
They can. And in fact, at smalljones.com has all the ways you can get it. Right now is a great time to buy it from RedHawk because they have a sale going on, I think, until the end of the week.
Great.
So you should check it out. And they also do free shipping.
Okay.
So,
And then you're on Instagram so people can follow you at Small Jones on Instagram.
Yes. I'm Small Jones on both social media and smalljones.com. Paul Jones is just too common. But I've been I taught and did research on social media starting in the early 90s. So been around a little bit.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and I look forward to talking later.
Really enjoyed it. And I'm so excited. What a great night of poetry. Tom and Paul have just been phenomenal so far this evening. And I'm very excited to bring up our last reader, Pat Riviere-Seel. I'm actually going to go ahead and drop the link to her website and her book into the chat. Definitely support these writers. The pandemic has been a really tough time to be an author because we've not been able to do all our normal book tours. A lot of that stuff is starting to come back. But anytime that you can support a poet or an author by buying their book, that is really a very powerful thing. And so our next poet, Pat Riviere-Seel, is the author of 4 poetry collections, including When There Were Horses, Nothing Below, Nothing Below But AI, and The Serial Killer's Daughter. I may have messed up one of those books there because I'm reading on my phone, but I'm sure that Pat will correct me when we bring her on here in a second. And her book, The Serial Killer's Daughter, won the Roanoke Chowan Award. She taught for 15 years in the University of North Carolina, Asheville's Great Smoky Mountain Writing Program, and she served as the North Carolina Poetry Society's Distinguished Poet in the Western region from 2016 to 2018. Before earning her MFA from Queen's University of Charlotte, she worked as a newspaper journalist, an editor, a publicist, and a lobbyist. Please make a warm virtual welcome for Pat Riviere-Seel. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's great to be here and to be reading with Paul and Tom.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming to share a night of poetry. You did, the second book was Nothing Below But Air, which came out in 2014. And actually, I kind of like the title Nothing Below better than Nothing Below But Air. So maybe we'll just leave it at Nothing Below. This is my newest book. I'll do my Vanna White moment right now. This is When There Were Horses from Main Street Rag Publishing out of Charlotte. And Scott has published my last 3 books, Nothing Below But Air and The Serial Killer's Daughter. I'm going to read a few poems from that book tonight, the most recent one. It's really tough following Paul's last poem. I'm not sure if that was a warning about what I'm going to read or not, but here goes. A lot of the poems in this collection came from dreams, and there were dreams that just really tugged at me and begged to be written about or explored a little bit more. That's one of the things I like about poetry, is I never know what I'm going to write when I sit down to write, but it's the exploration that makes it so much fun. The first poem is the first poem in the book, and it's called, the title is Into the Night. And it was one of those dreams that I had that seemed significant, and I really didn't know why. It just stayed with me, and I kept worrying with it. And eventually, this is the poem, Into the Night. The chestnut mare rests her chin on my left shoulder, nuzzles my neck with her velvet nose as I stroke her forehead. We walk a dirt track side by side. I know she's fast, but tonight we take our time. She lifts my left ankle with her hoof, breathes out stars that swirl around us while we spin through an unexplored galaxy. I try to read each star's wish. Once, when I was 12 years old and horse crazy, I rode my best friend's roan bareback across a meadow, letting the wind tangle my curls, burn my cheeks as I clutched a fistful of mane, urging, faster, faster. That girl did not know or care where she was going. Now my dream mare's sun-soaked hay scent calms me. I wake to a peace I have not known. The mare and I still bound, traveling down an unremembered road. I'm going to continue with another poem that deals with the night. And Paul said poets have written all these ridiculous poems about birds. And I think every poet has written at least one poem about the moon, probably many more poems about the moon. And I came to have an intimate relationship with the moon when I moved to Yancey County in 1992, out in the woods, where there were no streetlights. I'd moved from Annapolis, Maryland, and suddenly found myself out in the darkness. And I lived in an old farmhouse where the windows were close, low to the ground, and at nights of a full moon, the moon would come in and fill my bedroom with light. And it was so intense that I would sometimes get up and go outside and just lie in the moonlight, or even dance in the dewy grass by myself. Certainly probably scared the neighborhood dogs. This poem is called What the Moon Knows. She knows shadow, how to slip behind clouds. She's perfected the art of disappearing. She knows how to empty herself into the sky, whisper light into darkness. She knows the power of silence, how to keep secrets, even as men leave footprints in the dust, try to claim her. Waxing and waning, she summons the tides, Whole and holy symbol, she remains perfect truth, tranquility. Friend and muse, she knows the hearts of lovers and lunatics. She knows she is not the only one that fills the sky, but the sky is her only home. Like a lot of us, I write poems to exercises. And this is a poem that I wrote as part of an exercise with a poet friend of mine. I know it's Karen Stewart here. You know Carol Peters. Tom, you may have met Carol in South Carolina at one time. She and I were doing some exercises together. And she said, let's write a poem about our names. And I thought I'd written all the family poems I was ever going to write, but writing about my name sounded like a fun thing to do. So this is the poem that came from that exercise. Stability. My mother named me after herself, Susan, the name she never shortened, like mother. Never mom or Hara, mommy. A nurse, she preferred the formal. Slang, nicknames, anathema, crude, or maybe just imprecise. She carefully measured ingredients in every recipe. If it's a girl, we're going to name her Susan Patricia, mother wrote to her sister. But we'll call her Pat. I never asked why she chose a nickname for her imprecise daughter. Maybe a nod to her desire for a curly, red-headed boy like the one she married. Or was it a way to differentiate us? She told me once she'd considered Priscilla as my middle name. Difficult to shorten to anything but fluff. I never asked her why she settled on the cross-gendered Pat. Single syllable, the name that served me well, allowed an identity that generates assumptions, while the moniker remains my three-legged stool. I was looking for a poem to read that might be a seasonal poem, and I really don't have any seasonal poems. There's a poem in my book, Nothing Below But Air, that is titled, My Mother in the Last Stages of Alzheimer's Disease Comes Home on Christmas Day, and that just seemed like too much of a downer to read tonight right before Christmas. So this is a poem from When There Were Horses that mentions Christmas and came out of a time about 5 days before Christmas. When I was living in Asheville, my husband was working in Memphis, and he was not going to be home until after Christmas. So there I was in this great big house up on a ridge by myself, and was looking forward to having a book signing at Malaprop's. Then it started to snow, and it kept snowing, and it kept snowing. And the next morning, it was still snowing, and I woke up feeling very happy about being in my nice, warm, cozy house. And then the lights went out. This poem is titled Power. First, I ate the Ben & Jerry's Cherry Garcia. That morning, the power went out. 5 days before Christmas, the kitchen remodel near completion. Gas stove still connected, gas log sizzling. I buried milk, eggs, butter, the Pinot Grigio in snowdrifts on the deck. It could have been worse. 2 elderly cats, down comforters, candles and flashlights with fresh batteries. We snuggled in for the day. Hazy shades of orange, violet blaze the sky. One by one, the lights across the valley illuminated the neighbors' cozy homes. I closed the blinds, lit a few candles, tried gratitude for what remained, blessed everyone and everything I could summon, as if willpower alone could fill the room with warmth and light. Outside, in the darkness, the snow fell. Do I have time to read 2 more poems or just one? Kimberly, I know we're running low on time. So this is the title poem, When There Were Horses. I miss the hammocks, the teenagers swinging between trees, high-pitched laughter, urgent talk. Sometimes at night their joy would float through the house's open windows. They were so alive, innocence sweet as freshly cut hay. The future, an unnamed galaxy. Riders still gallop horses across the field into the woods. But now empty picnic tables replace hammocks along the perimeter. Last week, a man spent 2 hours mowing, mechanical hum measuring the hours. Today, when I walked out near dusk, a black Mercedes parked beside the gate. In the middle of the field, a man and a woman lay on a blanket, feeding each other sun-baked brie spread on a French baguette. Maybe they are lovers who wait until the sun sets, then shed their clothes, offer their bodies to God, desire unbridled. When there were horses stabled here, there was a cat that asked for love the way cats do, running figure eights around your legs, arching her back. I loved like that once. The man said he had always loved me. Maybe he had. Maybe he never loved me. It no longer matters what is true. I head back to the house, searching for the car, now lost in darkness.
That was great, Pat. Awesome job. How wonderful. Wow. There's so much great imagery there. Thank you for that. And so we can just get your book directly from your website.
From the website, you can order it from Main Street Rag. If you send me a message, I'll be very happy to send you one for the price plus a couple of dollars for.
Right. And then you can sign it.
And I'll sign it. That's free. I sign for free.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm going to bring everybody back on for a second. So here comes Paul and here comes Tom. That was so phenomenal. I just so enjoyed that. What a great night.
Thank you both.
I wanted to ask you've had books all come out in the past 3 or 4 months. What was it like producing a book of poetry during the pandemic? Is some of this stuff that you were already working on beforehand and the kind of book was already in the chute, so to speak, or did some of this work, was some of it written during the pandemic? Tom, what about you?
Our book, the one that my daughter and I have done, was really written out of the pandemic. It's called Worlds Unmasked, which of course we all know what the mask is.
Right.
And the subtitle is A Journey Through the Plague Years. And purposely didn't use the word COVID and purposely didn't use the word pandemic, because plague is a word that is historically applicable, down through the ages. And so it kind of is a casting of what it's like to live through an extreme experience like that. It's not a journalistic book. It really is a conceptual book with my daughter's photography, because she had time to take the pictures. Ironically, the pandemic allowed her, she had to be released from her work. She couldn't do her work anymore. And so she took her camera and just went around taking pictures of things that touched her and moved her during that funny feeling of the pandemic. And then I wrote haiku for each one.
Oh,
so
wow.
there are 135 photographs and 135 haiku.
Awesome.
Oh, wonderful.
That's what that is.
Great.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so that's definitely that's definitely a product of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Paul, what about you?
Well, the pandemic conveniently coincided with my long-planned retirement, so it was perfect. And the pandemic was great for me. I have a rich inner life, and I drew on that for a lot the poems that are in the book, many of them, and others that are out places, having found their homes now. I get up every morning and read poetry and write poetry and send out poetry and get rejections for poetry. But I'd say probably a third to 2/3 of the book was written and published within the last 2 years.
Wow. Very cool.
So it's been good for me. It made me up my game. It made me, I put all work aside and made poetry my business. And it's always been my pleasure. Like Tom and like Pat, I've been at this for a long time, but my relationship over time to have concentrated time, just totally dedicated to this work. Has
How many books do you think will have come out of the pandemic? Hundreds, probably, maybe thousands.
Oh, I think a lot of people had a lot of time to write.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and we all come to these seeing the world through different diffracting mirrors.
Wow.
So some of us through a kind of formalism, some by a kind of looking for healing, some by trying to look for an outlet for anger and disappointment, some finding love. It's the beauty of poetry is that there are so many voices and so many ways of expression that's so broad and highly, highly inclusive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Pat, what about you?
Oh, the pandemic was wonderful for me. I wrote most of these poems during what was really a very difficult period in my life. A lot of major changes, a lot of losses, just a lot of turmoil. And during the pandemic, I was able to take a look at a lot of what I had written and what I'd sent out, what had found homes and what hadn't, and do a lot of revision and put the book together. I've been planning to put a book together for a long time. And the pandemic was great. I have a hard time shutting up and sitting down. I mean, I really do. So this was good. I was able to focus, and putting a book together for me is a lot like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. There's something really exciting and fun about it as you read through the poems and the body of work, and you see what talks to each other and what connections are made. So I had a really good time doing that.
Awesome. Absolutely.
What about you, Kimberly?
Oh, I got very busy. I started this reading series called Carolina Poets. And it can be pretty busy.
Yes.
You know, because we have Wits in Poetry. So we actually did 5 social justice murals as well through the nonprofit here in Greenville. So I do a lot of promoting other poets, but I do also have a new book that's finished. I'm just in the revision stage right now. So, but I did a lot more probably organizing than poetry writing. And also homeschooling my daughter. So
yeah.
But it was all good stuff. It was all good stuff, other than the pandemic part. But one question I do have, readings are really starting to come back. Do you guys have some in-person readings coming up in the future?
I have some later in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll, of course, happy to do more because I can, but I've done one in person with actually with Pat in Raleigh at So and So Books. And then I did a radio thing in Asheville, actually on Asheville FM, right at Thanksgiving, and another radio thing in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and then some other online readings like this. Yeah. But I'll be in New Bern and a few other places come spring.
Great. Awesome.
Good for you.
Tom, now, are you still, I know you do some events sometimes out near Table Rock.
Well, that organization is no longer exists. But I'll go where anybody asks me to go as long as I can walk or drive.
Yeah.
And those days are fast diminishing.
I think you got a number left. Yeah, so definitely, if anyone's watching, you run a poet, you have a bookstore, definitely these poets are available to be brought to do in-person reading. Pat, what about you? Do you have some other in-person things coming up or?
I have a few things in the spring coming up, but like the reading with Paul was one of the first things that I did. I did a live reading at a boutique here in Burnsville. One evening, which turned out to be a lot more fun. I had no idea what to expect. I mean, you go to a retail store, pandemic has changed the way you do business. And there's no bookstore in Burnsville.
Right.
And so here people were shopping, listening to poetry, having a little wine. It turned out to be really a fun event. And after the store closed, a few people were left, and we just sat around in a circle, kind of like the old days, reading poems.
Have a little community there. How fun. I think that's one thing that everyone does miss. You know, I know that Zoom has really been a lifeline for so many people in these virtual events, but it's definitely, you know, I had some poets over last night, and, you know, we definitely missed not being able to get together in person and, like you said, sit in a circle and share some poems and, you know, have that kind of poetry community. So I'm glad we're starting to head back in that direction.
Me too.
But thank you all for joining us tonight. And if there's anything final that any of you guys would like to say, or anyone you want to give a shout out to, please feel free to do so before we kind of wrap up here.
Kimberly, I'll say that this little poetry book I did back in 2010 is still in print, which is another way of saying that they're warehoused in my house. But if any of your listeners would like a copy of that, if they could send me a little postage money, I would be glad to send them one of these books.
And your email is, well, they could actually message me and I can forward it to your email.
Yeah,
actually.
or if they could get my mailing address from you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We can work that out. So if anyone's interested, just send us a message on Carolina Poets and I'll kind of get that worked out.
Okay.
It's got a lot of great books. And Pat, and we know Paul, we can get on your websites to get your books.
And I'm on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I don't do Twitter. It's all too much of a time suck for me.
No, right?
But I wish you all great success with your books.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Thank you. You too, Tom.
I loved hearing you read.
Last word to people listening is read poetry.
Yeah.
Buy poetry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, that's the most important thing. We got to read poetry, buy poetry, and then enjoy the community. Well, thank y'all. This has been such a treat. I so appreciate your time tonight. I'll be sending out the link because this is going to be archived on YouTube and on Facebook. So if you just joined us, this whole show will become live online in just probably like 2 minutes. So you can go back and rewind it and watch the whole thing. So, but anyways, we're here.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Kimberly.
you all so much. I really appreciate it. We'll see you guys soon. And we will be back here again in January, because in December it's going to be Christmas. So I think it's like January 13th. The event's already up on Carolina Poets, and then we'll be every second and fourth Thursday. Once again, I'm Kimberly Sims. Thank y'all for being a phenomenal audience. And as we always say, poetry is life. So I hope y'all have a great evening. Thank y'all so much.